Well, good morning. Good to see you this morning. And we're starting a new series, and we're going to run this. Now, next week's Mother's Day. Tracy's going to be speaking, but we're going to have a 3-week series. And really, this is going to be sort of family-oriented on what's going on here. But if you have your Bibles, turn to the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 6 is where we're going to eventually be. But if you look through the Bible, there's all kinds of different people in the Bible. We start off with Adam and Eve, and they had 2 sons, and one ended up dead, and the other one was the murderer. Not a good start for mankind. We go through and we see guys like Noah, the hope of the new world, and Noah gets drunk right off the bat. Right off the boat, I should have said, probably. And so he's not a help. And down the line, we find all these people that God keeps telling us their stories have these character flaws that are just so good. And we call it character flaws. We can just say it just simply as sin. But Jacob was the big liar, deceiver, and he's deceiving everybody. And of course, he was taught that way by his mother. Mom was deceiving dad, and so, hey, son, just picked it up and did the right thing and followed mom's example there. And we get this, and it develops into 12 sons who, man, there's so much in that family that's a mess. And if you don't know that whole story, this is worth reading the Old Testament about. But you go through the Bible and you see these families, even till we get guys like David. What a great guy, man after God's own heart. Horrible father, horrible husband. I mean, just what kind of guy was this guy? And here he is, he's nurturing his kids to be obsessed with taking over the throne. He's nurtured one kid to be a rapist. That's the kind of guy David was. And that's the kind of father he was. And his family falls apart. And it's amazing we end up with Solomon. Solomon, he has things going right at the beginning. And what do we find out? Solomon just couldn't keep away from women. 1,000 of them in his life. Can you imagine Mother's Day at that house? That would be a hard thing there. It really would be. And the countless kids running everywhere, and just nightmare. And he ends up being a failure. And in fact, his son Rehoboam is worse than him. And all through the Bible, we see these pictures of people that sometimes we aspire to and say, man, what a great guy. David, a man after God's own heart. Beat Goliath, all those great things. Daniel, the overcomer who overcame so many obstacles in Babylon. And we go through these people and we sit back and sometimes we almost glorify them. Which is a wrong thing to do, by the way. We put them up on pedestals and we pick our favorites. We go, well, I like Paul, and I like Peter, and I like whoever, James, I like this guy. And they're all great, but they're all failures. And yet, what you have to understand is God didn't put their stories in this book for us to sit back and go, well, they're the ideal person. That was never the case. See, what you have to understand about the Bible is God's story. As he's telling it, and the main character of the story is God, and what God is trying to do through all these people, and we could sit here all day long telling you names of people that you would identify with some like, I don't know who that was, but all those people are part of God's story, and God is trying to tell his story through them. And that brings us to me and to you, and this is where it fits in. God is trying to tell a story, his story, through you, through your family, through us. And yet, as we look out in 21st century, we sit back and go, like, church attendance is an all-time low. Monday night we had our RBA meeting, and Jeff Joyce pointed out the fact that in the residents of Seminole County, I think it was either 24 or 26% of the residents of this county attend church regularly. That means somewhere around 75% do not go to church anywhere regularly. Now, when we say go to church, it doesn't mean a good church. That could be the Mormon church. That could be any church. But that's what we're looking at in our numbers. That's horrible. And we're in the bubble of the Bible Belt here, guys. And so I look at it like this, and most of us, and unfortunately, most of us who've been around church for a long time, we're sitting back saying things like, I remember when. Yeah, that's good to remember. It's bad, though, to hold on to those memories. That's not what God wants, because God wants us to move forward in the future. And that's what really the Bible's all about, too. It's a moving forward God's story. It always progresses. And how do we secure our future? Not our country, by the way. God's not interested in securing America just to have America. And let's not get confused. I heard a guy yesterday talking about, he was quoting some Jeremiah verses that really had nothing to do with America, but he was trying to make them American promises and stuff like that. You can't apply promises to the children of Israel to us. No. They're not the same thing. That's bad. That's bad hermeneutics. That's bad application. Because God gave, Jeremiah 29:11 is a great verse. Probably most of us love that verse. I know the plans I have for you. Hey, that's good if you're in Babylon and you're captive for 70 years and you're Jewish. But that doesn't apply to us. Okay? It's not meant for us. So that verse, you can throw that out the window. That's just bad interpretation. That's a little off my nose. But the idea here is God's trying to tell the story, his story, through us, through you. And when we get down to it, this is so important. This is the principle for those 3 weeks that we want to talk about. The family exists, and understand this. The family exists even in its imperfection. Because there are no perfect families. Now, this is, and I say this because so many times we come to church, everybody dresses up, and we've got our families, and we're trying to look all nice and great. That's great. That's awesome. I love to see families get involved with God. But even when you get involved with God and do the right thing, you're still imperfect. You're still a failure. You're still full of sin. That's just the truth. And I know it's a hard truth to swallow, but we can dress up, we can polish ourselves off, but we aren't God, so we don't fit into God's perfect status. So let's not try and act like that. The family exists, and that's what the Bible tells us, even in its imperfection, to display the heart of God to every generation. That's an important aspect there. Now, when we realize this and look at the Bible, here's why this is so important. From the very get-go, God established a family. Adam and Eve. Not Adam and Steve, Adam and Eve. And he established that they would raise these kids, and of course, man rebelled and did the wrong thing, but we've had this imperfection going on. And then in the New Testament, God's working his grace, and he's trying to redeem that family that fell, and so he establishes a new family. And that new family we call the church. The church is a family, yes. God's family. And so the family, even though it's all its imperfection, there are no perfect churches either, is there to display the heart of God to every generation. But understand that puts a responsibility. See, the family, and understand this is so important, the family is God's conduit. The family is God's primary conduit. It's his timeless platform to put his glory on display. That's what, when you look at the Bible, that's what you should see. And it's amazing that he could use a family like Jacob's, right? We talked a little bit about him. But it's just messed up there. See, looking back through the Old Testament, in the Old Testament, God's promises, God's commandments were passed from one generation to the next through the family. You ever think about that? You know what's breaking down in our country today? The family. So if we're going to secure our future, we've got to think family issues here, and that's what we're going to talk about. See, the heart of God was communicated primarily through the heart of the family, and that's always been God's reason here. And so to set the stage for what we're talking about here, the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is that fun word. I love it when I meet new Christians and they have to pronounce that, and they're like, they come up with all kinds of crazy things. Deuteronomy, you can call it whatever you want to call it. It's the second law, and really it's the second giving of the law. But what happens here is Israel, in their history, they've been in captivity for over 400 years in Egypt as slaves. And through that, they lost their identity as a people. Their identity had been threatened. Genocide had been trying to be carried out by Satan and his minions. Then as Pharaoh tried to exterminate them. Their will had been crushed, and on top of it all, their faith was assaulted because they didn't even know who God was by the time 400 years passed. They were slaves, and they weren't allowed to worship their God the way God wanted them to worship. And so along comes this guy named Moses. And Moses helped them rediscover their distinctiveness as a people and rebuild their faith. And that's so important there. But after years of waiting, and basically I'm trying to sum up what happened here. From the time they leave Egypt to the time they actually get into this promised land, there's about 40 years. And they have traveled around in circles in the desert for 40 years. Can you imagine that? I remember the first couple of years of our marriage, we moved, 2 or 3 times. And anybody ever, like if you were in the military home, you know what that's like. But you move so often, you get tired of it. Anybody ever get tired of moving?
Yes.
Yeah, I hate that. And you box everything up, and I just felt like we were always doing that, moving, and it just wears you out. And I was like, oh, it's not fun to do. Moving's not a fun thing. And you get to that point where you're like, I just want to settle. Can you imagine living 40 years? Going in circles in the desert. There were times they didn't have any food. There were times they didn't have any water. There were times they just were complaining about everything. And there was, I say, they shouldn't have been complaining. Obviously, we know that. But it would be hard not to complain if you're in the desert, right? Come on, you guys with me? It'd be hard to complain. Don't you complain when you're in the desert of your life? I do. It doesn't help, but it makes me feel a little bit better. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it makes you feel worse. But anyway, they're walking around, expecting to one day get into a promised land. The promise of God was that they would inherit Canaan, a land that's filled with milk and honey, flowing with milk and honey is actually the description that was given. Their land where, hey, they brought out these grapes. There were clusters that were so big that they just almost couldn't hold them. They had to get 2 rods and carry them between them. It was just amazing what was there. And God said, I'm going to give you everywhere. I'm going to give you the beaches so you have somewhere to take your vacations. I'm going to give you the mountains. I'm going to give you everything. And it was just the best place. And here we are. The day is approaching when they're finally getting there. It's been, the U-Hauls are wearing out. They are getting tired of having to pack up and move. And on top of it all, the desert was full of tombs, graves. You see, a generation previous had to die before the younger generation could get in. And now they're on the verge of getting into this homeland, getting able to settle into a place, a promised land, and the day is coming, and what happens is Moses gets up in front of the people like he always does. He's the leader, he's 120 now, and he says, hey, by the way, I'm not going in with you. That's Moses, really? You're the guy, aren't you the guy that said, let my people go? Aren't you the guy that did all those crazy, I remember the whole Red Sea party thing. I was just a little kid, but I remember that. And Moses, what are we going to do without you? Moses said it'll be all right. But it's crazy. The book of Deuteronomy really is a long farewell address that Moses gives to his people. And he talks in this farewell address, and he begins by recounting their journey from Egypt to where they're at, and reminding them of the covenants they made with God, and God made with them. But then all of a sudden, Moses shifts his message. And he shifts his message so that they can now see something different. And he has a new and unexpected concern about their future. And I think this fits in so well in our time period. Because they were ecstatic about finally getting a place to settle down. Finally getting a place to call mine, my house, my home. Yet, Moses begins talking not about how they're going to settle, but he's anxious about how these newfound blessings are going to affect their faith. And that's really something that should resonate with us. See, he's not intent on addressing how they would transfer their goods into the land. He's really more intent right now on how they're going to transfer their faith to their children, their children's children. And I think this is where we fit in. Because what I look at when I sit back and I see churches all across our area, good Christian churches, I see churches that, I'll be honest with you, we were at the RVA meeting the other night, and I'm telling you that they should have just held up their AARP cards to be in that meeting. No offense to anybody who's older, but I looked around and go, there's nobody young here. Everything we're doing is old. It's falling apart. We're not doing a good job of transferring our faith to the next generation. And I want to look at our church and go, hey, what are we going to do? We need to secure our future. We need to see a younger generation know God. And how do we do that? It's not by just continuing doing what we did 50 years ago, by the way. It is by following the principles of God's Word. And that's what we find here. So, if you have your Bibles, Deuteronomy chapter 6 is what a very famous passage here, and I know we're going to be in this for these 3 weeks. Deuteronomy chapter 6 is where we get into the side note here where he addresses passing on their faith to the next generation. That's what we'll see. So the first 12 verses says this. Verse number 1, these are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you're crossing the Jordan to possess. So you get the idea that he's moving forward, moving into the next generation. So that, just in case you were missing it, verse 2, your children and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. That sounds great. Verse number 3. He says, hear Israel, listen, and be careful. Be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in the land, flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Now, that's the pre-message, right? He just told you basically what I tried to sum up for you. Hey, I've got concern for you. You're going into this land flowing with milk and honey. Don't mess up. Don't miss what's so important here. And this is where he begins the most famous part, because this is where we get to the Shema, which is beginning in verse 4. This is something that they put there even today. Jewish people still recite these verses. So verse 4, this is where it really gets important. This is the verse we're going to stay in today. He says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Verse number 5, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the roads, when you lie down, when you get up. Tie them, the symbols, on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. Verse number 10, he says, when the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, to give you a land with large, flourishing cities which you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things that you did not provide, and you did not dig, and wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Then, when you eat and are satisfied, be careful and do not forget the Lord, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You see, if you read through that, and it's really plain. If you think about what Moses is saying here, what he's trying to say is Moses is warning about the dangers of becoming spoiled by the wealth of Canaan. And you know what I would tell you, people? Christians in America, we've been spoiled by the wealth of America. We have. I know this isn't going to be fun, but the truth is we've been spoiled by and this is where we sit. And Moses would tell us today, just like he told those Israelites, hey, listen, you're going into new situation. Now think about it. They had nothing in the desert. Oh yeah, God was with them. God showed great miracles. They saw God's mighty power. We'll get back to that down the road. But in the desert, what was there? A lot of sand and a lot of nothing. There's a lot of death, by the way. But now they're going to move into big homes. Homes they didn't have to build. Sounds all right, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't that sound all right, Seth? You didn't have to. Wouldn't it have been nice not to have to build something? Somebody else build it for you. It was already there. Just move in. I mean, that building process can wear you out, can't it? And you're going to get to eat things that you didn't even plant. You're going to get to drink where you didn't even dig. Digging wells. None of that's going to cost you anything because God's going to give it. But what I want you to be careful of, that all those things don't distract you. I want you to be careful that all those things, and if we're talking about the church in the 21st century America, you know what? I would say the church has become distracted. It's not just 21st century. We got distracted a long time ago. But we've been distracted here. See, he's admonishing these Israelites, don't forget God. Don't forget God. Well, they weren't going to forget him. Hey, think about it. They weren't forgetting him in the desert. Why? Well, in the morning time, he was a pillar of cloud. He led them. But at night, even more spectacular, he becomes a pillar of fire. Can you imagine just walking around looking at this fire pillar in the air? That's amazing. I can't even picture it, but here it is. They're doing this. And so every time they move, they've seen God. And he's saying, hey, you know what? When you get to this new land, don't get so caught up in your homes. Don't get caught up in your stuff for your jobs. Don't get caught up in the things you get now. Don't get caught up in the milk and honey. Don't get caught up in all these things Because Moses knows and God knows how easy it is for them to be distracted by prosperity and riches. God knows how easy it is for us. That's the problem. See, Moses gives them a plan to guard their heritage and transfer their faith to the next generation, to secure their future. And so that's what I want to look at in the next three weeks as we do this thing. So let me give you a couple of principles. Principle number one. Principle number one, widen the circle. Widen the circle by pursuing strategic relationships. In our 21st century culture, it's amazing. Phones. You can get on a phone now, anywhere in the world, and you can actually, if someone else has a phone, and most people do, you can FaceTime somebody on the other side of the world. In fact, when I said that, nobody would be like, wow, that's how commonplace it is. You can literally see things that you will never ever get to go to, probably. Although, in this day and age, you can go there easily, too. I mean, we live in a world where you can see things that, think about it, your grandparents never saw. I mean, talk about encyclopedias, right? Anybody own an encyclopedias at their house still? Yeah. Yeah, a couple funny guys back here. Hey, you know what? I can remember a time when an encyclopedia salesman came knocking on your door to show you the latest encyclopedia. Do you remember this? They don't do that anymore. That's a worthless job. Nobody wants them. Why? Because information is in your hand. It's in your phone. And that's it can be a great thing, it can be a bad thing too. And I'm not here to beat up on technology, that's not it at all. What I'm trying to say is, we are so full of technology that we can touch and reach out to people that we may never know, but we know less people than ever. We have less relationships than ever. We are stunted by technology, and here's what we start off, and this is so amazing here, you probably missed this. Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse number 4, this is how he starts off. He says, "Hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Hear, O Israel." Now, we read those verses and we're like, yeah, he said that. No, it's important that he said that. Hear, O Israel is the covert context of this passage. What do I mean? Okay, so some of you probably already, as soon as I start talking, said, well, I'm not married, or I don't have kids, I don't need to listen to this, and you're sort of turning me off. That would have been easy, because that's sort of probably what people in Israel would have done too. But notice here what Moses does. He gathers all Israel. In that crowd, there are widows, there are widowers, there are orphans, there are aunts and uncles, there are grandparents, there are great-grandparents, there are moms and dads, there are little kids, there are singles. There are all kinds of people that you can think of in society. And he says, "Hear, O Israel." The context is everybody. Yes, right. Widen the circle. And what he's trying to do is understand. Now, I want to make sure I'm clear. Back when Bill Clinton ran for office, his wife Hillary, bless her heart, she said it takes a village to raise a child. It does not. It takes godly parenting and godly home. Right. But let me help you here, because we've defined the home in the 21st century much tighter and much less distinct than God did in the Old Testament. You see, here's the amazing thing. A family in the Old Testament wasn't as neatly defined as it is today. It wasn't mom, dad, and some siblings, right? Some kids. In fact, you realize most of the families in the Old Testament had up to about 80 people in that family. See, all the aunts and uncles and cousins and everybody else were included in that family group. By the way, a lot of times you find these people living together. Grandma, grandpa, everybody lived in the house. You just sort of added on to the house as they got married, you'd add it on, and it just became huge groups. And we think, like, that's crazy, man. In fact, the American dream is that our kids grow up, get married, and get out, right? Amen. Okay. I love being an empty nester. I love it when I come back, but I love being an empty nester. Moses, though, he is speaking to all Israel about the importance of families passing on their faith to the next generation. And we're sitting back going, why do we need this? See, we would have turned them off and said, no, I don't need that seminar anymore. I'm done. It's not my problem. But God said it's all Israel's job. Let's widen the circle by pursuing some strategic relationships. You see, households in the Old Testament were significant because they represented multi-generational support for young couples, for married people, for kids. They could go to grandma, grandpa, great-grandma, great-grand. They could go to generations. In fact, I think of it this way. Every time you hear in the Old Testament them mentioning God, he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. That's 3 generations there. And he's talking about this on, and that's how they thought, but that's not how we think. Because we sort of eliminate that, that's crazy old grandpa over there, that's good. No! Stop living in narrow ways, and he's saying, here, O Israel, if we're going to pass and we're going to secure our future, our faith has to come from all directions of our relational life. That's important for us. Next week, we're going to do a baby dedication here, and I'm excited about it. Because when we dedicate babies, yes, it is the parents' responsibility, and they're dedicating themselves. But you know what, as church, here's what I'm saying. It's our job to vow that we're going to support them. We're going to help them. We're widening the circle for them. We're going to get to know them. And if you don't know these families that have kids, you haven't taken the time to get to know what their heart is and what they do, hey, you need to. You say, well, I'm going to be proud of you. Hey, shame on us. Shame on us. The Lord our God is one, but we're supposed to start as we widen the circle. And that's the first action there. He asked for. See, in widening the circle of our relationships, yes, it's the parent's primary responsibility, but you know what? It's the family, it's the people of God's responsibility. Let's do this thing. Let's build a community here. And a wider circle, it doesn't just give us a place to belong. A wider circle helps us give our families, give our young people a significant role in the bigger story of God. You see, what Moses and God through Moses was doing is saying, hey, Israel, not just Moses, not just Joshua, not just the famous guys that are coming along, but all Israel, you all get the promises, so you're all going to get the responsibilities. And I think that's what's problematic in our church too. Because we sit back and we go, like, we separate ourselves out, and that's a good little sermon there, preacher, but you go out and win Seagrove. You go out and get people in. You go out and do this. No. It's our responsibility. Let's widen the circle here today. Let's go out and reach people with the good news of Jesus Christ. Because 75% or so of Central or Randolph County doesn't even go to church. How about your neighbor? How about your friend, your boss, your coworker, the people you meet? How about them? Do they know Jesus Christ? Because that's the context. And see, the right community is not only important because of what it gives to your family, but I think this is so important. In Israel, they understood the right community is also what the community holds your family responsible for. Mm-hmm. Down the road, another story you think about is a guy named Achan. You know Achan's story. He was a guy, and it always blew my mind until I came across this and was thinking about this. This is how it all works. So Achan is this guy. He along with all of Israel, made a vow that they would follow Joshua's lead. And if they didn't, they would be put to death. That was first. Then they go in, and the first city that they fight against to conquer this new promised land is Jericho. And Jericho, the walls fall down, you know the story. Walls fall down, and God says, take nothing in it. It's all mine. Yep. You don't get anything this one. You kill all the people who don't believe in me, but all the stuff's mine. So don't take any of the gold, don't take any silver, don't take any of the precious fabrics, things like that. Don't take anything for yourself. This is mine. So walls fall down, they go in, they kill everybody. Achan's looking around going, nobody's going to notice. So he grabs some stuff. And he thinks, and I'm still puzzled by this, because what was he really thinking? But he takes the stuff, and he goes back, and knowing that he can never let anybody ever see it. Because the minute they know, they're going to kill him, right? So he thinks, I've got away with this. He takes his shovel out, because they didn't have anywhere else to stay. Where's the self-storage back then? Takes his shovel out, digs under his tent, and buries everything. And he begins like to live life with that. Except for God reveals it to Joshua and the rest of the people. They go to the next battle and God lets them lose to a small little town they shouldn't have lost to. And God says it's because there's sin in the camp. So God reveals down the road, they go through all these families. Isn't that amazing? They keep going through all these tribes, these families, until they come to Achan. And I thought about this, and I thought, when Achan gets caught, and he finally, he says, hey, this is what I did, and they go back and they find all the stuff buried under his tent. They take Achan. But they don't just take Achan. They take everybody in his family. They take all his animals. Everybody's killed. Everybody's stoned. And I sat there and thought, how unfair is this? No. What God, once again, is doing for us is helping us understand there's a responsibility in the wider community. We have a wide, and this is where churches are failing today. We don't put up the wider responsibility because we're all, hey, if you're one of those people like, the minute the doors are open to leave, I'm gone. Hey, well, wake up, because that's not God's plan. God's plan says, hey, fellowship and learn to be part of the wider circle of God. Amen. Because it's not just the benefits you get from it, it's what you're contributing to it. That's what really it is. See, in the New Testament, let's take it over to New Testament time. The New Testament church was never intended to be simply a something that you attend. Well, I punched my clock, preacher. I came in and sat there and listened to your message. That's about as painful as I could get, right? No, that's not how it works. God didn't put us here just to sit in that seat that you're in for an hour or so on Sunday mornings. And if that's all you're doing, then shame on you. Widen the circle by putting in some relationships that are strategic in your life. By getting involved to serve. You'll get more out of God, you'll get more out of life, and you'll help build His body, His family, the church. And on top of it all, see, God knows this, is when you're doing this wider circle, that things get passed along from one generation to the next. See, since we've become a generation of churches that are high and by, quick in and out and all that, because we got technology we don't need to meet, the less that we meet, the less that we're moving. Churches are in decline. Salvation is in decline. Baptisms are in decline. That's what I just keep hearing these numbers over and over again. And I'm sitting back because we've made it the way we wanted. Because we've been lured by the land of Canaan. And all the benefits and blessings of the material responsibilities that we don't have time for God anymore. That's what we need to get. See, church should be a vibrant community that engages your family to demonstrate God's love to a broken and damaged world. That's what God put us here for. That's what He's telling them. That's what Israel is supposed to do here. So the question I have, and this is the question we have to ask ourselves, what are you doing to encourage godly relationships with people outside your home? What are you doing? Because when we don't do that, we call it discipleship in our time, evangelism, discipleship. But when we're not doing that, we're not doing what God wants. And so your family is not... Hey, there's a good chance when you're not doing that, that your kids will go off away from God down the road. There's a good chance that Maple Springs down the road won't have anybody here if we're not encouraging our family to build godly relationships with people outside of our home. To invite and invest in people. That's what we're called to do. The second principle that I talk about today, still in that verse, is this. Imagine the end by focusing your priorities on what matters most. We always think at the beginning, and I can imagine this. People are going into the promised land, they're thinking like, how are we going to get into Jericho? How are we going to get all these towns? How are we going to beat everybody? They're starting to think at the beginning. And God, through Moses, is helping them understand, hey, don't start with the beginning, but start with the end. Start with the end results. Imagine the end by focusing your priorities on what matters most. See, what mattered most wasn't how they were going to conquer things. What mattered most wasn't where they were going to live. It wasn't the parcel of ground they're going to get. It wasn't all the benefits of the promised land. What mattered most was the priority that came with that promised land. See, I would say it this way. Each of us here is going to leave a legacy, a personal legacy. I always think about this time of year, I always think about Elaine Sutter. You guys that were been here long enough, you remember her. I remember this time of year because she always loved Homecoming Sunday. It's a couple of weeks from now. And she loved the eating part. Like, that was her favorite thing, man. She loaded it up. And man, it made me, like, happy to see her happy with eating. And she was just so, I mean, she would hope that I would get done early so she'd go down to the fellowship hall and get her food. And that was a great thing. I was thinking and we could sit here and go through a lot of names of people that have passed on. Every one of them have left a legacy. And for time's sake, I'm not going to do it. Plus, it'll probably cause us to cry a little bit about some of the legacies that have been left. But it breaks our hearts when we think about some of these people. But each one of us is leaving a legacy, so what's yours? See, what Moses wants us to understand here, as we imagine the end, is what you give your children or what you do for your children is not as important as what you leave in your children.
That's right.
I'll say it again. What you give to your children or what you do for your children is not as important as what you leave in your children. Think about it. See, Moses offered a vision of a life well lived with one phrase that establishes a frame of reference for everything. Go back to the verse. Verse number 4. We've dealt with the hero of Israel. He says, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That's the end of all things. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. But I got work tomorrow. I don't care. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. See, if you dwell on that one phrase, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you put that as the total thought of your life, you know what? You never get off target. You never miss the opportunities of what God's speaking about here. See, what Moses is doing here, he's beginning to remind Israel about the centrality of faith. And the centrality of faith isn't built upon a family. It isn't built upon a church. It isn't built upon a pastor. It wasn't built upon Moses. He didn't say, "Hero Israel, listen to my great words because I'm a great leader." Although Moses was a great leader. He says, "Hero Israel." In the great context of our community, there's one thing you better know. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. And that's where it begins. Basically what he's saying is, hey, listen here, people. Listen and don't forget this. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. Moses is saying everything I've said, everything I will say, hinges on one central truth that trumps everything. God, our God, is God. I was thinking about this, man. If we really were going to get this in our lives, we would take our phones that we spend so much time looking at, our tablets, our TVs, our refrigerators, our vehicles, and we'd put a card on them and say, our God is God. Our God is God. You know what that would remind us? Remind us to stop thinking about our job as God. Our boss is God. Our home is God. Even our family, we tend to do this. Our family is God. Your family's not God. God is God. The family is a tool, a conduit to glorify God. That was what we started off with. See, if we don't start with God, we may end up in the wrong place, and that's what Moses is trying to get to. Hey, when you cross the Jordan, when you go into the promised land, if you don't start with God, our God is God, then you may end up, and you know what they did? They ended up in the wrong place, didn't they? That's right. That's the story there. That's the easiest part of it. See, that's what we want to understand here. See, Moses is making this point, and this is the point we need to understand. It really doesn't matter what our kids know if they don't really know what matters, what really matters most. And that's so important. It really doesn't matter what our kids know. Hey, I think you ought to teach kids as much as possible. Man, especially, hey, parents, do me a favor. Teach them how to drive. I have found they're the worst drivers in America, right within 50 miles of here. I'm telling you. But it doesn't really matter what our kids know. And you can replace that word with have. It doesn't really matter what the kids have if they don't have what really matters. Either one works. And that is so true. And that's probably the legacy of America right now. See, what Moses is saying here is it would be heartbreaking to enjoy the benefits and prosperity of a better lifestyle. No more nomadic lifestyle, right? No more riding around the desert in circles. It would be devastating to live in a land that's rich and flowing with milk and honey and become experientially rich but never really know God. It's America today. It's a land that's flowing. Hey, we are in the richest country, and we got a president that's going to make us richer than ever, right? None of that matters if we don't turn our hearts and our minds back to God. Amen. Politics won't get you there. I'm telling you that. It's got to be in a personal relationship with God. See, this passage that we're looking into, it was recited, and it still is recited faithfully twice a day since the time of Moses. It was recited when they first get up in the morning, and it's recited right before they go to bed at night. It was on the doors of their home as visual reminders that of God's role in their daily lives. It was to help them keep perspective. And you know what? Here's what I realize when I talk to people in churches today. You know what? We've just lost perspective. We worry, and all you have to do is have a simple conversation in any church. You can start here. We'll talk about the weather. We'll talk about sports. We'll talk about the economy. We'll talk about everything, but we never talk about God. God doesn't even make it in. Well, what's your week like? Well, I got to do this. I got to do that. It's never, hey, I get to spend time with God. God never really matters in our lives. We don't plan out how much time we're going to spend with God because He's the least of our concerns. It's all the stuff He gave us is the most. See, when you remind yourself frequently that God is God, it doesn't give you cause for more stress. It gives you cause to trust God more. And that's the great thing. You see, the Shema establishes God as the central character of the story that connects every generation. And that's what Moses is trying to understand. You want your grandchildren, generations down the road to know God? Then make God the central character of the story. See, God is that central character in the Jewish life who connected every generation, every family, and every individual to God's goodness. Hey, when you look at the genealogy of Jesus Christ, that's what you should be thinking. That's an amazing story there. See, when we can trace God's infinite love through time, through those countless genealogies that bore us to death in the Bible, it gives us a reason to pause in the middle of all of our chaos and get some clarity. And that's really what Moses is trying to help us understand. See, what Moses is worried about is this simple shift. A shift from trusting God, that they had to trust God every day for everything, to trusting stuff. And that shift from trusting God to trusting stuff is a gradual shift. But when it happens, everything hangs in the balance. See, we're not just talking about whether this building will exist and people will be in it years from now. We're talking whether kids and grandkids, great-grandkids of yours will be in heaven, or they'll be in hell. That should scare us. We should understand that. And this is exactly why, when Moses was called up to Mount Sinai, the very first things that God told him there, Exodus chapter 20, verse number 3, he says, "You shall have no other gods before me." Verse number 4, he says, "You shall not make yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or in the earth beneath, or in the waters below." Verse 5, he says, "You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God." And you know what he's saying there? Hey, God, our God, is God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That's what he's saying there. And when it comes to the battle for the heart, what we have to realize is what is temporary always has a way of crowding out what is eternal. That's why churches are empty. That's why the job becomes way more important than Bible study on Sunday evenings. That's why my sleep is way more important than Sunday school. That's why my vacations are always going to happen on Sundays. You ever realize that? We've talked about this before. Our sicknesses and our vacations always happen on Sundays. They never happen on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, unless we had some time we could take. But we take short trips on Sundays. See, what doesn't matter is God, because we don't really believe in what He's saying. There's one guy I wouldn't want a vacation from. There's one guy I wouldn't want to take time from. One guy I wouldn't skip out on. It'd be Him. But He's the guy we don't fear because we don't know. That's the problem. And Moses is simply saying, stay focused. don't forget who your God is. And that's the message we've got to pass on. And when we can pass that on to our kids by repeating it to them all the time, by showing them in our lives how important God is. See, he was warning about the risk of losing focus and shifting their priorities. And the more we remember this, it's really all about God, the easier it is to focus on our priorities of what matters the most. See, right away you're going to say, well, my job matters the most. Not if you really believe that God is the supplier of everything you need. But that's going to take some faith. That's where it's tough. That's where the rubber meets the road. See, we can talk about how God blesses us, God does this, until, well, my boss says I have to work on Sunday, or I have to do this, and I'm not going to be able to help. I can't do this for you, God. Then we believe our boss is more important than God. That's the truth. It is. It's a struggle. See, we are quick to pick up a yardstick the culture hands us and measure success by a specific standard. See, we start with our kids by thinking it's important that they attend the right school, right? It's important my kids find the right career path, go to the right schools, marry the right spouses, live in the right homes, have the right friends. And so what we find is parents today spend an enormous amount of energy and time trying to get their kids to get ahead. And let me just say, those can all be important things. I don't want to say they're not. But they're not what's most important. That's right. And when we sacrifice what's most important for something that could be important, we're sacrificing our next generation. See, every home has the opportunity to create an environment leveraged with frequent reminder that the Lord our God, the Lord is one. We must make a conscious effort to remind ourselves that there's a bigger story and that God is at the center. See, what Moses was doing before the people of Israel that day was ringing a bell. He was showing us how important it is to recalibrate our hearts, to give something different to focus on. See, he was modeling the need to constantly guide our families back to its core, to what's most invaluable. Moses knew that keeping the family's focus on God would affirm its identity and shape its destiny. See, he's imagining the end. It enables us to distinguish more clearly between what matters and what matters most, and that's where we're confused the most. So let me ask you this question. What do I want the members of my family to become? See, there are families today that are going to make their kids great doctors, great lawyers, great businessmen. They're going to send them off to good colleges. Hey, they're going to have great athletes in their family, great football players, great basketball players. But I'm afraid a lot of those kids are going to end up burning in hell. That's right. Because 100 years from now, I know that's going to happen. Yeah. What matters most in your family? And how much time are you actually giving to it? How are we doing as a church? Are we widening the community, helping these families understand that? I know it's not easy. Moses understood that clearly too. He wasn't trying to give you a picture that was picture perfect. What he's trying to say is, when it comes down to it, don't forget God is the central figure in all of our stories.